Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's really good to be back with you. Thanks for joining us. We begin with a record high number of coronavirus cases in the U.S., upending daily life for millions of Americans. For the first time in months, hospitalizations have topped more than 100,000 people across the country. President Biden is taking action, announcing the U.S. is doubling its order of Pfizer's COVID treatment pills. The president also emphasized, again, this is still a pandemic of the unvaccinated. He had a stark message for those who refuse to get the shots.
You know, be concerned about Omicron, but don't be alarmed. But if you're unvaccinated, you have some reason to be alarmed. Many of you will, you'll experience severe illness in many cases if you get COVID-19, if you're not vaccinated. Some will die needlessly.
As divisions remain between the vaccinated and unvaccinated, the country is approaching 1 year since one of the most divisive events in U.S. history, when rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol building. So far, more than 725 people have been charged in connection with the attack, including dozens of members of far-right extremist groups. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are expected to deliver remarks to the nation on Thursday. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the president will, quote, speak to the truth of what happened. Meanwhile, in Congress, voting rights and election reform are dominating discussions among Democrats. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is gearing up to potentially overhaul the chamber's controversial filibuster rule in order to pass key voting rights legislation. He's hoping the one-year anniversary of January 6th will add momentum to his party's ongoing fight, but he needs support from every Democrat.
So if we don't act now, my belief is the big lie will threaten the very future of our republic. It's an uphill fight. I don't want to give anybody the illusion that we're there, but hopefully we can get 50 of us to come to an agreement.
For more, I want to bring in Kris Van Cleave, Eli Sokols, and Jess Bidgood. Kris is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Eli is a White House reporter for the Los Angeles Times. And Jess is a national political reporter for the Boston Globe. Welcome to you all. Eli, the president addressed the nation about the Omicron variant for the first time since the holidays. Was there anything new in his remarks about how the White House is approaching the pandemic?
No, I mean, this was more or less the same, putting the president out there, making sure the country knows that this is his focus. But the message really is the same thing that we've been hearing for weeks, ever since Omicron kind of took over and became the dominant variant. You're hearing the president really trying to delineate between vaccinated people and unvaccinated people, urging folks who haven't gotten their shots yet to get them because, as he says, the symptoms, if you get the shot, are very mild for the most part, and trying to really reassure the public that is vaccinated and to explain why, you know, in the White House's view, this isn't a reason to shut everything down again. They appreciate that the country is tired. They're exhausted by this pandemic. Parents want their kids going back to schools. The president today saying that schools should stay open and that this is not a reason to shut down or to abruptly halt the things that people are doing going about their lives as long as you are vaccinated. And so really trying to stress that at this point. We've seen the president also try to depoliticize the matter of vaccinations over the last couple of weeks, recently expressing, you know, explicitly that, look, Donald Trump, he's touting the vaccine, get the shot, trying to appeal to those resistant conservatives and Republicans who have seen being vaccinated as some kind of, you know, political statement and stayed away from it, really trying to break through that. I don't know how much more success he'll have with that, but that is where the White House is going, trying to really reassure the folks who have gotten the vaccine and urge as many folks as they can reach who haven't and try to get them to do so.
Yeah, we'll see if that shift in messaging actually changes some people's thinking on this issue. Meantime, Kris, Thursday marks 1 year since the January 6th attack on the Capitol. There's been a new development from the House Select Committee investigating the attack. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we are hearing from members of the committee now that they intend to ask Fox News host Sean Hannity to voluntarily cooperate with their investigation. We are hearing from members of the committee that there are dozens of texts, perhaps, between Hannity and White House officials strategizing about how to respond to events leading up to January 6th. They would like to talk to him about those communications. Mr. Hannity's attorney tells CBS News they are yet to hear from the committee directly, but that would seem to be coming up in short order here. So what the committee is stressing is they don't necessarily want to talk to Hannity about what he is saying on his show, but rather what his text messages, what his electronic communication, his phone calls perhaps, with the White House and with the former president. We know, we've learned that at least one text from Sean Hannity was sent to Mark Meadows, urging Meadows to urge former President Trump to make a statement during the attack on the Capitol.
Meanwhile, Jess, Democrats are putting President Biden's social and climate spending bill on the back burner and focusing on voting rights legislation. Why are they shifting their focus?
So Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has set a January 17th deadline to get something done on voting rights. As you said, he's hoping that the January 6th anniversary might help light a fire underneath some of his colleagues. But Democrats have set a lot of self-imposed deadlines over the past year and not met them. And it's not exactly clear right now what will be different this time. Schumer's biggest problem is that two Democrats, Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia, have consistently been opposed to changing the filibuster. They don't want to eliminate the 60-vote threshold for cloture. And already Manchin is reiterating his opposition, making it clear that this would be a heavy lift to get him on board. He wants rule changes in the Senate to be bipartisan, and he says that to go it alone would come back at Democrats pretty hard. Without Manchin and Sinema, it's not clear right now what Schumer's options are to meet that deadline, even as voices across his party say that Democrats need to get something done on voting rights.
So, Kris, given the political landscape that Jess just laid out, what realistically is the Senate's timeline on voting for a voting rights bill, and what are the options for how that could play out?
Well, Senator Schumer says that he plans to seek a change in the Senate rules by January 17th if Republicans block a vote again, basically filibuster, block the procedural votes needed to advance voting rights, which seems overwhelmingly likely to happen. There aren't 10 Republicans that are suddenly going to support the voting rights legislation that they have voted down time and again. So Senator Schumer has said that he intends to try to hold a vote on changing the rules. Basically, they would need to change or carve out the filibuster rules that would allow a majority-only vote to advance voting rights. Certainly there have been changes to how the filibuster has been done. There have been carve-outs in the past, so there is some historical precedent for making changes to the Senate rules. In fact, one of the things up here you learn pretty quickly is that the Senate rules are always seemingly subject to change. But in order to do that, as Jess was just saying, you would need all 50 Democrats to agree, and it's not clear that they agree. Democrats were parsing every word of Joe Manchin's comments to reporters today. He did say that he wanted to try to exhaust every effort to convince Republicans to come along. So some Democrats may take that as well. Maybe when he runs out of Republicans to talk to, you can move Joe Manchin into the yes vote, but you still have Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema, who's a wild card here. And if you don't have all 50 Democrats, you're dead in the water.
Well, Eli, how does the White House factor in? What is the White House's level of involvement in negotiations on a social spending plan and when it comes to voting rights?
Well, they're pretty involved, but they recognize that the situation, exactly as we just had it laid out, it starts and ends with Joe Manchin, really. And the president has a long relationship with Joe Manchin. They spoke after Manchin went on TV right before Christmas and said he was a no on the Build Back Better bill. The president and Senator Manchin, they did speak once just before the holiday. They have not spoken since then. And so at some point, there is an expectation that those two will engage again. I think they're buying themselves some time by focusing on voting rights first. And there's no easy answer or solution in the offing on that either. And the White House, they for a long time have felt, look, Manchin voted back in March to go through reconciliation to pass the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. There's always been kind of a cautious optimism or a hope that Manchin would be there in the end when it counted. A lot of people were taken aback when he went on television and said that he was a flat no on Build Back Better just days before Christmas. And so I think, they're very careful with Joe Manchin. The president will engage with him again. Maybe they'll get a smaller thing on Build Back Better. But I think there's maybe less optimism about voting rights, that he is somehow just saying that he really doesn't want to change the filibuster, but will be there in the end. Maybe if they exhaust everything, they get this, they don't find the votes, any Republican votes, maybe then Manchin will move. He has not completely closed the door, but I think inside the West Wing, folks are a little more sober about what they're dealing with the senator from West Virginia, and that he may actually mean the things that he says in the hallway when he expresses opposition to the bill or to changing the filibuster.
All right, we'll continue to watch how that plays out. Kris, Democratic Congressman
Elaine,
Bobby
may I jump in real quick?
Yep. Go ahead, please.
Sorry,
go ahead.
we just got some information from the January 6th committee confirming that it's requesting to talk to Fox News host Sean Hannity and sharing some of the conversations, some of these dozens of text messages between Mr. Hannity and then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. They cite a text on December 31st where Mr. Hannity apparently texted Mark Meadows, "We can't lose the entire White House counsel's office. I do not see January 6th happening the way he is being told. After the 6th, he," meaning the former President Trump, "should announce he will lead the nationwide effort to reform voting integrity, go to Florida and watch Joe," meaning the current President Joe Biden, "mess up daily, stay engaged. When he speaks, people will listen." Another text from January 5th where Hannity, again to Meadows, said, "I'm very worried about the next 48 hours." These are some of the things that the House Select Committee would like to talk to Sean Hannity about.
And Kris, just digging into that a bit more, give us some context here, because I remember very clearly before the holiday break when Congresswoman Liz Cheney began reading some of those texts from media personalities and others inside the Capitol to the former White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, on January 6th. Why are those kinds of texts significant here with respect to the work that the Select Committee is engaged in right now?
Well, the Select Committee is interested in who was talking to the White House, who was talking to the president, and who may have had some understanding or helped guide or advise the White House on its strategy leading up to January 6th, and certainly the actions during the attack on the Capitol. I think what you have heard Sean Hannity by some referred to as almost like an outside counselor of the White House. So we're learning now that Hannity was in contact with some of the highest levels of the White House and perhaps had some knowledge about what the thinking was around January 6th and the efforts perhaps to try to stop the votes from being certified on that day. And thus perhaps try to overturn the presidential election, the outcome of the presidential election. That's what the committee is trying to determine, not only, who knew what about the attack on the Capitol, but the bigger picture about this big lie and who knew and who was in the room, so to speak, who was communicating about the strategy around trying to essentially overturn the election results.
Right, because we've heard committee members themselves, those House Select Committee members, talk about the need to illuminate, as you say, who knew what when during those weeks leading up to January 6th. And certainly this would be seemingly the kind of communication that could help shed some light on that. Kris, I want to take a step back and ask you a question about sort of the bigger political picture here. Democratic Congressman Bobby Rush announced that he is going to be retiring this year after 3 decades in Congress. So that makes 24 Democrats and 12 Republicans who are not running for re-election. What could that mean for the midterms, particularly for Democrats who are trying to hold on to their majority?
Yeah, so redistricting was going to make holding on to the narrow majority in the House a challenge for Democrats to begin with. And certainly some tallies had put the advantage to the Republicans by about 7 seats just by redistricting, which would be more than enough to take back the majority. It does not necessarily mean doom and gloom when the majority party sees a lot of retirements going into an election. Certainly, Democrats are seeing far more than they have in past, certainly in recent history. But when you look at of the 24 Democrats, about half are 70 or older and have been in Congress for 15 or more years. So some of this is truly a generational change, but it comes at a time when it is going to be, for many Democrats, a seemingly uphill battle to win re-election. Some are being redistricted out of seats or being forced into seats that would be harder to maintain, and some are leaving and have said they're leaving because of the political rhetoric, just the heightened toxicity around politics today. But if you're the Democrats in the House trying to hold on to the majority, there is a lot of concern about not only the number of retirements, but just the map and the president's falling approval numbers, and whether or not this Congress will get enough done to satisfy the American people.
Well, Jess, you wrote about Republicans' difficulties in recruiting strong Senate candidates. How could that potentially affect the GOP's success in 2022 races?
Sure. So one example of that is happening in New Hampshire, where Republicans think they have everything they need to beat incumbent Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan. They have a favorable national environment, as we were just discussing, an incumbent with fairly low approval ratings, but what they don't have is a top shelf recruit. Governor Kris Sununu bowed out of the race in early November. He's kind of a GOP rock star up there who Washington Republicans were really hoping would run against her. Former Senator Kelly Ayotte, she too quickly said that she also was not interested in running. And since then, no major new candidate has entered the field. Now, Republicans in New Hampshire are insisting that will change soon, but there's really few other people in the state in the possible field of folks who are considering running who could match their name recognition. And this mirrors kind of an interesting dynamic around the country. Traditionally, electable Republicans are passing on races, people who have shown that they could win statewide, could kind of appeal to moderate and independent voters, while candidates who have really kind of tied themselves to Trump, some of whom have fairly checkered pasts, are rising to the top of the field. And that is giving Democrats some hope that they just might be able to hold on to that narrow Senate majority. There are at the moment few Republican candidates who are really emulating Glenn Youngkin, the Virginia governor-elect who is kind of one of the big Republican success stories of 2021, who really kept former President Trump at an arm's length. One place where that could change, which may make Democrats nervous, is Pennsylvania, where a hedge fund leader, David McCormick, may soon enter the race there. But overall, Democrats are hoping that some of these races are going to churn out general election candidates that may have trouble appealing to the statewide electorate and could give them a little bit of a boost in what is looking increasingly likely to be a tough midterm.
All right, so many fascinating dynamics to watch in the year ahead. Kris, Eli, and Jess, Happy New Year to you all, and thanks very much.